Bonjour. Asiem Nasiea, Anthamary Point, Tnitzana Humathwiam. Ear to e, Wakwathan Shwaimarth. Ichla, Shwayam, Ishwayamath. Ichla, Sauquexen. Ichla, Tzikalas. Ichla, IR number 1. Ichla New Westminster, Ichla Ta Schwametzt. Ami Tsepquatquilam. In the language of my ancestors, I let you know, my name is Mary Point, and I'm from Musqueam. I like to orient myself on and provide a sense of place. And there are so many names for this place that we're standing in. There's the area that borders what is now New West and Burnaby. There's the area along the shores that we used for ceremony. And there's an area simply known as the Long Shore. And across the big river, a place called Sauquexen, a place that's been heavily investigated, that has evidence of our occupation of this area going back millennia. But I think also the government at one time renamed this place Musqueam Indian Reserve Number 1, and then chose to expropriate it to make way for the capital city of New Westminster, which then later moved. Yes, shame. And then, so there's been many, many changes, but I think, you know, whether we think of this place as New West or our home by the Fraser or Greater Vancouver or a gateway to Highway number 1, I think collectively we think about this place as our home. And the last words I said, Ami Tsepquatquilam, really mean a lot to me to say, because it connects me to our ancestors who would have been the first faces you met as you rode into our part of this world, or as you came up along our trails. Our warriors would see you coming, and they would come out to greet you and ask you if you were coming with good intentions. And if you were very welcome to enter this place. If you weren't, it would be a different conversation. But for me, I just want to say all are welcome here today. I'm so pleased to be here with my cousins here in the front row, and also a little nervous to be speaking our language because I only ever did year 1 and they're quite fluent. Victor here is a teacher of the language, so I'm sure I'm not even going to make eye contact, so. But with good intentions, I hope I didn't do anything other than try and honor the people who lived here before us and many who rest beneath our feet today. I'm really honored to be here with Nadine, my close friend. We've become friends since I was accidentally subbed in when she was opening this journey in Oppenheimer Park years ago in the bucketing rain. And we've kind of been together ever since. We just hold each other up because this grandmother's journey, I think about my grandmothers and all that they endured, all that they had to endure through all of the changes, and yet they remained resilient. And I think about my ta'a, who was from the Squamish Nation. She had a job at Canada Post, and she used to take the bus through the downtown east side, and she saw so many of our people separated from their natural line of support. And she thought, this is not right, because before these others came here, there was no such thing as homelessness. And our family, we were always taking care of one another. So she started this whole program, I'll call it. It was really just her in the beginning, where she would gather up donations of food and clothing and pots and pans and things for children and put them in her canoe and row across from the North Shore to what is now Crab Park. And she would just give it out to people. She was always like that, always. She was written up by the North Shore News as a mother to us all. And I really think about her a lot when I think about our grandmothers. And I was really pleased to be standing in that place as the Grandmothers Journey began, because there are so many elders in the downtown East Side who've just kind of wound up there because that's where you go for services, and they're far away from their natural line of support. And this journey, this first box that carried messages of love for our late loved ones, and how that journey began and where we are now, Nadine, so many families providing a tribute to their grandmothers and their journeys, and sharing culture, sharing our stories, making sure that we remember and that we honor our grandmothers. So I really, my heart is full to be standing here with all of you tonight as this film. I didn't go on the canoe journey because it was another busy rainy day. It always seems to rain on us, but I met up with them later when they came back here to the indoor part of the day. But I've watched the trailer, and I can't wait to see the film. And just, there's nothing like being out on the water. When you put that paddle into the water, you're not alone. You're there traveling with our ancestors. And look at me getting all emotional, but it's important, it's powerful out there where the dinosaur sturgeon are still in the river and where our grandmothers paddled. It just fills me up. My hands go up to you. Well, that's going to be enough talking for me because I'm becoming an emotional fool. So, and we want to watch this film and really drive it home to our panelists as well. So I'm going to, before I walk off the floor, I'm going to open the floor in a good way with a song that comes from my great uncle Dominic Point, his traditional name Tiakthet. Tiakthet and the Point family, our great-grandfather Manette, they hail from the Musqueam village of Quyen. Quyen, for those of you who are from the Lower Mainland, is now known as Garry Point in Steveston. So renamed by Captain Vancouver, who, like the Spanish before them, just came in waving these papers declaring us non-human and trying to grab up and rename all our places and spaces after their friends and compadres. And we became known as the Indians from the Point. And then somebody decided it was legally required for us to have a last name, and they decided our last name would be Point. I recently saw, just one more side story, I recently saw something pop up on my timeline because I've been talking about Quyen, and my phone listens to me these AI days, and this carving appeared, and it was attributed to James Musqueam and Dominic Musqueam, and I thought, oh, this must be before they decided we were Points. So anyway, it's interesting to see how we've been labeled and relabeled as Indians and Indigenous and First Nations and Aboriginal, but we know who we are and where we come from, and that's the important part of that story. So I'm going to sing this song that comes from Tiakthet, that comes from Quyen. It's a song that we sing when we're entering a new community to let people know we're coming with good intentions. It's a song that we sing when we're standing in community to share a little bit about who we are. And it's a song that we sing at the beginning of any new journey, a wedding, a funeral, a graduation, or days like today as we celebrate the journey that brought us to this film today. And I think about all the many oars that will go in the water yet, eh, Nadine? So there are plenty of people here who know this song, so I hope you'll join in. We've been standing together since the first day as well, when he was about this high at first. So. Yo, he, yo, he, yo, he, he, yo, he, yo, hey, 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 he, yo, he, yo, Hi, Chka, little cousin. Hi, Chka. Hi, Zepka.
Good evening. My name is Quyen Hoang, and I work for the City of New Westminster in the Public Art Program. And I just wanted to thank you all. Wow, this is amazing, Nadine. Thank you all for coming here tonight to watch the premiere screening of the Grandmothers Canoe Journey. And welcome to you live streamers out there. This event is being live streamed. I'm just here to say a few words about the project. There's going to be many others, and including the film, that'll give you a better understanding of Nadine's ever-expanding, multi-year, multidisciplinary, incredible project that has actually taught the City of New West so much about the land that we are on, the history that we don't know well enough, and how to bring community together, how to honor protocol, how to heal as a community. I'm actually a refugee from Vietnam. I came to Canada with my family, and we were the boat people. So there's a lot of resonance for me in this project. We came here in search of freedom, in search of a new home, and I really struggled as a child, growing up away from our homeland. And then it wasn't until grad school that I actually learned the true history of Canada, and that was incredibly jarring because I'd been in the country for 20-some years and I'd never known of the similarities of what we escaped as well. So I am really, truly honored to be a part of this project, and a very small part, and I'm really grateful for all of you here. And I just want to thank Nadine. And Nadine, you should come up and please tell everyone about the project. This project is, this is a film that captures the community chests coming down from Cheam to Sapperton Landing in New West on May 20, Cheam, sorry. And on May 24th, and it's a beautiful short documentary by Love Intersections, and Public Art had the privilege of supporting a small part in the production of it, so I'm truly grateful for that. And it's also one part of, as I said, Nadine's ever-expanding project called Honoring Our Grandmothers' Healing Journey. And so there's also an exhibition here on the 3rd floor in our museum called Downstream Where the Waters Mix, which is an amazing exhibition that I hope that if you haven't seen it, you should go through it. I think my favorite part is how the artists have interrupted the narrative of the museum with their presence, their art, their voices, and I think that's such a powerful thing that is really needed, and our museum staff and colleagues have been so wonderful in supporting that journey and that project with you. So you know that we're going to screen the film. It's about 10 minutes long, and then afterwards we're going to have a discussion with artists and supporters of the project. David Ng and Jen Sungshine are the moderators for the panel. And the only thing I wanted to share with you is that you are being monitored by a film and photographed. So if you are in witness protection, please let us know. No, just if you have any concerns of being photographed or being on camera, just let us know. But yeah, Nadine wants to share this with others who can't be here, so that's why you're being photographed. Okay, bye.
Everybody else's connection to why they're doing the journey or a part of the journey is different. My personal reason is to, in a proper way, following the salmon cycle, the wild salmon cycle, which is 4 years, that I collect the spirits and the histories of the families that I've lost down here, from my grandmothers to my aunties. So it's for all those connections of blood that had left Intlakatlan to Shuswap to survive in Vancouver Coast Salish territories, that I'm bringing them home in a proper way with the environment, the natural cycle of the water and the salmon that connects us all. Our healing has everything to do with the protection and the caretaking of the lands at the same time. So
one side has sturgeons coming together with a wild rose in the middle, and that's to represent the sturgeons that live in these rivers that are just such beautiful, like, ancestors. We should treat them with as much respect as we can, be quiet on the water, treat them with respect, call them if you want to see them, don't go like digging for them, and protect their habitats. My grandma passed before I was born, but I keep hearing story after story of her being like, give my daughter this dress, she'll need it. And they didn't know if her baby was going to be a boy or a girl, and like these things that it's like ancestral connections. And they talk about the grandmothers and specifically like great grandparents being closely related to great grandkids or grandkids, and how it means like they're closest to the portal. And I've been thinking about this a lot with weaving as well, because they talk about like the veil thins at the loom. I read that somewhere and I thought that was so cool. And Nadine and I think about how we honor our grandmothers through history and through lots of things, and it's really amazing that I get to be a part of this and this group of artists that all are connected through our ancestral ties, but most importantly our ways we honor our grandmothers. So, yeah.
This is the part that I like the most. I don't know why. I think it's just I like really got my design game going with that. And then this is the other side.
We were talking about how we need to kind of shift the narrative for an exhibition like this that is so tender. Elders will say that they're putting teachings at your feet, and my big thing is, but you still need to pick them up and you still need to carry them. These spaces often want to put up a mural and say, oh, we've indigenized, but it's a continuous relationship. So an exhibition like this is a way to honor the continual relationship that we're having with these artists. So having this touring exhibition shows that we're all interconnected, and it's a way for these spaces to understand that in a more literal way.
It seems like within this society, everything has this little compartment of what it is, and then yet I look at who we are as Indigenous people. We were never in a compartment. The water can't be separated from the salmon can't be separated from the land, the people can't be separated from the water, like all of it, of how we function together. It was always stated that we're moving with the wild salmon. So when you're moving with the wild salmon, that means you start where the wild salmon is at and you're moving with them. It has to be with the elements chest. So the elements chest has to move with the wild salmon downstream, downriver. When I came in, they said, bury your eyes, it's a colonial museum, and we know that we need to work on our relationships. We know that we've impacted Indigenous people, and I hope that other museums throughout BC are going to start looking at what they have presented within their museum and how harmful that is to Indigenous peoples. Things started to move forward just the way they did, and I thought, you know, if I were to come in, they would actually have to be let through each tribe that they hit.
They would bang the drums, and somebody on the other end would either let them come in by banging drums back, or alert them of something, or just ignore them and make them turn around and go the other way.
When I was talking to Karen and Victor, I was telling I would love to have the movement of it being on the water.
This is our home range here, the Grandmother Mountain and her daughters. And from her flows the glacial waters And these are the salmon finding their way home using the scent of her glacial waters. I originally thought it would be really great to decorate this box telling a story of our late 90s fisheries battles here in Cheam. And because there's a ton of stories to tell, and all of that resistance against the Department of Fisheries and Oceans was led by grandmothers. When I started to do that work, my box started to crack. And I decided to go in a whole other direction. My house got really cold and the whole top of the box cracked. And so I filled it in with wood filler, and then I layered on some acrylic medium and white paint and added this texture. And this texture to me represents the wool itself, a little bit of curl in the fleece kind of thing. And our origin story is very much connected to this mountain, Cheam, behind us, whose name is Shisike. And our origins is really connected to thunder and lightning. And so the cracking in the box was extremely loud in my house. And it gave me this emotional feeling of like lightning and thunder. And so I shifted my whole project to reflect our origin story. In a scientific sense, the glaciers themselves have a unique scent, and that scent calls the salmon home. And this grandmother mountain, she also protects the salmon and calls them home. So there's like what you might call an Indigenous science tie-in there. I immediately think of the changing climate situation, and it's always good to have a reference point, and what we call shuohuam are our reference points to a very distant past, and our squelquel are more recent histories and tellings of how things are. And to pair them together and have an understanding of what the state of the world has been, where it is, and how to read the land and the water and our connections so that we can coexist here in this place is really, I think, part of the responsibility of art.
And when I look at the women that I've asked to call here today to speak, I look at the energy that they have, or like the energy and the power of the grandmothers that stood here for years, that taught us the language, the lessons, the culture, the beauty, and the protection of the lands for all the children and the protection of the community. I see that in all of these women that I'm asking to speak today.
Our matriarchal matrilineal understanding is our matrilineal connections to land. So if you're looking at separating our people from a land basis, where do you start? You start at the roots. I know I was able to find a ton of our ancestors up to what I call the white paper ceiling, which is contact, where our oral traditions are erased. But they don't even write down the names of our grandmothers many times in those census records. And I don't think that's just a mistake, like, oh, we forgot the old lady's name. There's a reason why there's silence there, is because that's where the power was.
People really just don't know anything about Indigenous people as far as like our history. I wasn't even taught anything in school myself. Like, it was literally nothing. Very, very cool to see that history coming to light. And in the future, hopefully more and more people will know about this.
This process that we're looking at is kind of like reorganizing our understanding of our history, our understanding of our trauma. It's sort of reorganizing these bundles so that when our young people inherit these bundles, it's not just a chaotic box of information and memories, but an organized bundle so that these young people can interpret that history and have a solid foundation for healing from that and an understanding.
What does it mean to be a good relative? To think about how we're all related, and to think about kinship and solidarity in ways that are about our principles and our values, and Yes, our identities are important, but it's really important that we don't let those identities divide us, that we figure out a way to respect our differences and to bring them together in service of Indigenous law and Indigenous peoples as they reclaim their rightful place in these territories.
I think that honoring our grandmother's healing journey is an undertaking of love and carrying forth the work of making that love actionable, making it something that we are joined together in our relationships to each other, to our responsibilities for the land, for the future generations, for our ancestors, and of course between each other. Nadine has never once compromised in Nunavut principles in the way that whether we are in the Bill Reid Gallery or in like Oppenheimer Park on the downtown east side, that the same amount of dedication is shown, that the same amount of care to the people who are there, that people are fed, that she brings salmon, that she brings shwishim, that she brings foods from our territory, that she ensures that there are people from our territory who are there, that there are children there, that there are grandmothers there, that people are included and thought of and considered in a way that is so rare to see, and that is like particularly like my point of pride and inspiration, and getting to see just such actionable love.
Are you going to be on my left, or are you stage left or stage right? Stage left? Stage right? Hello, my name is Jen Sungshine, and this is David Ng, and we are the, I suppose, creators of the film. Thank you. We're the co-artistic directors of Love Intersections, a media arts collective that produces intersectional and intergenerational film and artwork. We're also your moderators this evening. So perhaps, I wonder if we should just invite the panelists up. If the panels could just come to the colonial long table and find a seat where David and I will be flanking on either side of the table. We'll share a little bit of, while they're getting settled, we'll share a little bit of a context about our involvement and how we came to be involved with the Grandmothers Project. I will say, I think Mary really helped me recall and remind me of how appropriate that tonight it's also raining. When we first met and filmed at Oppenheimer Park in the downtown east side, it was raining. When we met and filmed at Cheam, it was raining. When we met at Kwantlen, it was raining. Every single shoot, every single stop point, it was raining. So I think it's a really beautiful synchronicity that we're gathering here tonight on this dreary, rainy, and beautiful night. David, do you want to share a little bit more about
Maybe
project?
I'll just mention about the community chest. This is our third film that we've collaborated with Nadine on. It grows out of some of the work we've been doing in Chinatown, and the community chest was I think our first collaboration, where we invited, as was mentioned in the film, artists from different cultural backgrounds to contribute to the community chest. Yeah, maybe we'll actually just pass it to Nadine to introduce the project, and then we'll get started in the discussion.
Yes, but in like a short 2-sentence. I know it's hard. I have to moderate. We have to moderate this.
Oh, darn. Why did I hire them?
Do you want me to read your bio instead? Because I prepare bios for every single person.
Actually, I think that the film speaks for a lot of it. So when you look at the exhibition, we began in 2021. It's not just my story, I have my personal story with it, but as more artists come in, different artists and different people join in, it becomes their story in their own way. And a lot of our stories are very similar. And I think the important thing about what we're carrying with this elements chest on how the 4 basic connections that we all have, regardless of our nationality or where we're from or where we're not from, is really the uniting of people to protect the environment and the water and the salmon, but also in a sense of the women, the impacts of the land toward the women of the importance of who they were within the community, and really where we are as Indigenous people I love how when I speak to these artists that we talk about Ronnie Dean, he's always talking to me in these riddles that are always feeding me. Just back in the old way, I was talking about Ronnie Dean the other day because there's something about how we don't speak from books, we don't speak from text that is out there in whatever people is researching PhDs in education. There's something about these old stories that they tell us, they make me feel so good, and when I hear the language, that actually our history is in that. And it brings us back to those places. So the journey of Grandmothers Canoe Journey, honoring our grandmother's healing journey, everything has to do with the grandmothers, the women, the children, the impact of genocide on Indigenous people and our families. And my feeling of these artists that have come forward or that could handle what this actually means, because this is actually handling a really delicate, personal, heartbreaking thing within their lives. So the fact that I have these incredible artists that are joining me here is powerful to me. They're a gift to me, because a lot of people can't actually face what it is that we have to face within ourselves, within our families, and within our communities to actually deal with what had happened with the impacts on ourselves personally through genocide. So also we had more time than just this colonial time that I probably would be able to speak longer, but I'm gonna let it go at that because you know, that's how it was. Like we had an issue in Indian country, you weren't just cut off, you sat there until it was done for days. It wasn't just this government timeline is pushing you through and, oh yeah, I can't swear, sorry. So, I don't know, that's even how I feel here, like the whole idea of how we sit up here feels, you know, doesn't feel community, you know what I mean? And I think that's what it is what this feels like is like where we move, we're trying to find any way to break down that idea of what this whole system is really about. And I could only do it with amazing artists like Rita, Ronnie, Athena, and they're just as important as anybody else in this project. So I'm going to cut it off there. Is that good?
Nadine, you can speak as long as you want. That was beautiful. Why don't we do a quick introduction of the panelists? David, it's not in order the way that I have gathered. Maybe David, you'll start with Ronnie, and then we'll go.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Ronnie Dean Harris, known as Oz12, is Stalo, Statlium, and Nlaklatam, multimedia artist whose career spans music, television, film, and community engagement, with notable contributions to projects like Moccasin Flats and Arctic Air, a passionate advocate for Indigenous culture and decolonization. He also facilitates youth workshops, collaborates on musical projects, and actively supports environmental and social justice initiatives.
To David's left, Ronnie's right, Rita Wong teaches at Emcee Carr and is a writer, activist, archivist, and distinguished poet who explores the intersections of life, language, water, and land. Her poetry attentively critiques the imposition of foreign words on the unceded Indigenous lands of British Columbia, while calling readers to recognize their responsibilities to the land, the planet, and their communities through a poetic that blends anger, grief, wit, and hope. She calls for collective action to address the climate crisis and systemic inequalities with an economy of care and solidarity.
And to Nadine's right is Athena Pika. Athena Pika is an interdisciplinary Coast Salish artist from the Kwantlen First Nation, working primarily in two-dimensional media with a focus on Salish design and traditional practices. A two-time YVR Art Foundation Emerging Artist Scholarship recipient, her work is featured in collections such as the Museum of Vancouver and the Bill Reid Gallery. And she continues to engage with public art through murals and installations across Greater Vancouver. Welcome, Athena.
Sitting next to me is David McCullum. You were the hardest bio to find online. So elusive, so hard to find, but I found you. Serving on the board of directors at the Bill Reid Foundation, David McCullum is a settler who developed a deep appreciation for Bill Reid's art in the mid-'80s while working near Reid's Granville Island studio. Passionate about supporting community initiatives, David currently chairs two nonprofit societies and helps organizations transition to more sustainable models through his technology companies, Friends of the Community program that you also run with Emcee. Yes. He's not an expert in art or culture. I beg to disagree. I beg to agree, beg to disagree. English is my second language, so that expression is I disagree with that, but is an avid supporter of the vital role that both play in healthy societies. Welcome. Let's give him a round of applause. So these are sort of this is the panelist that we have selected out of what I think Nadine was an original group of like 15 of the people involved with this project. So I want to start from perhaps a simple question. So I'll give you a flow of tonight. I'll ask a few questions to each of the panelists, as well as addressing to all of them, broadly speaking, about their role and experience working with this project and working with Nadine. And then we'll have some time as well for all of you to pose your questions as well. So my first question is a sort of a vague one, and you can interpret it in any which way. What is your relationship to grandmothers? And you can interpret it to your relationship to the Grandmothers Project, or you can interpret it as your relationship to your own grandmothers. Perhaps you want to share a story about your grandmothers or other grandmothers. So I'll leave it sort of open-ended. Let's start with Ronnie.
Okay. I'll talk to you guys. Don't breathe on me, please. Thanks.
My parents were 16 when I was born. So I didn't go to residential school, but I was pretty close to going in utero. So I was raised by my grandma and my grandfather up in Albion there, Kwantlen territory. I'm a mama's boy. For life, mama tattoo. She passed away in 2003. And so all the work that I do as a researcher comes from her, comes from my papa. To this day, I lost my belly button when I was a baby, so I used to dig around when I was a kid when mama and papa would be gone. And I used to steal these books. One of them was the Emcee Ethnographic Notes. I've been reading that book for over 40 years. And the Coast Salish Essays by Wayne Suttles. I've been reading that book for over 40 years. And I read it every week. And it's still to this day. And so from their curiosity and their work, and, they were part of that resurgence of Sion and Longhouse, Like the valley people came down to Musqueam and they were planted that seed and took it back up that way. And so they witnessed that coming out, that resurgence of our culture, end of potlatch ban in 52, and then the resurgence of our culture starts to grow and these fires are starting to be lit around lower mainland area. And so I'm old enough to have witnessed some of them putting on those ceremonies for the first time. I was there when masks come back in our family for the first time. I was there. I got to see those old people. I got to witness Isidore Tom and Kenny Moses and old Indian doctors, people doing the real work. And that's what I was given by my grandmas. And we talk about this idea of weaving, and I told the story about my grandma. She said when she was little, she was about 8 years old, and she was cutting wood. Sign of the times, 8 years old, out cutting wood with an axe. And she severed her finger, the tip of her finger off, just below the nail, just above that knuckle there. And she said her grandma, she called her Ta'a, gathered that finger and cleaned it. And she went around the house and she gathered all these spider webs, these cobwebs. And she put that finger back on there. And she wrapped those cobwebs on there. She bandaged it. And you couldn't really tell that my mama had a missing finger. A little bit of stiffness there. So, I've been really trying to understand the language. The language is, I grew up as a hip hop artist, so I can speak English really, really good. And so it took me a long time to be able to even say Inglakachmach. It took me years to be able to say that. So I'm starting to understand now this idea of weaving. I understand what the role of colonization and the churches were here was to make our culture and our understanding seem superstitious and primitive, and to replace our cosmic cosmology with the Holy Trinity of Father, Son, Holy Ghost. Amen, whatever. But we have, in our culture, we talk about matrilineal, we talk about matriarchy, almost in a hyperbolic way. But if you look at the word stlene, or word for woman, at the root of that word is stlen, it's to weave. And what do they do in the censuses? They call their grandmothers spinsters. That was to devalue the art of weaving, to devalue the art of our grandmothers as a craft. But weaving isn't just, oh, my grandma or my wife wove my shirt, do you like it? Even though the word alouette, the ending for our words, alouette means a shirt, your garments, because your mom wove that for you. But our women weave more than just our clothes, bringing our communities together. They weave our genetic material of our families. They weave together the watersheds that we come from. Meet at that single point of our grandmothers, all the watersheds where I research is all those things woven together. woven at that point. And then if you go into creation, these elements of creation, the spider upstairs, she weaves electricity and magnetism together to create light, to create matter. These are the things our ancestors are talking about, and it's encoded in the language, it's encoded in the art of weaving, it's encoded in the number 8, it's encoded all the way up and down the coast. And so I'd like to add something to this, following the journey of the salmon. I think we should be following the journey of the salmonids, because oolakins are just as important as salmon in this area, if not more important. You can follow the path of the range of oolakins and follow it in the language. That point here was our clock. That was when it was time to go down to Catesy, down to here, down to here, down to this place, down to this narrow point where Cheam stood there since transformation, standing guard of these gifts. That was that gift from Swanissit, from that lady upstairs who brought those oolakins here. All she asked for was dog bane in return. And so when the missionaries get here and they wipe those webs clean, and they try to replace the cosmology, and they bring their Holy Mother here. So it was an easy switch for them, because we were already praying to our mom. We're already understanding those sciences, so it was an easy switch for them. But they killed a lot of people to bring that time frequency here. And so as I come to understand this place and try to go through the records, and like I said there, they erased all my grandmas from the census. I know all my grandpas up until a certain point. So my grandma brings me here. That's what, to be quite honest. And so I wanted to share some of that with you, is this idea of like how anthropology and archaeology and then the capitalist arts trade really turned our grandmothers into these craftspeople, where my grandma had to trade baskets for used clothes, right? But now I can't even buy a basket of my grandma's for less than $2,000 from art traders. You see how that works? So I'm going to stop there, if that's okay. Thank you.
Maybe we'll pass it to Athena.
I'm not as comfortable with the microphone as Ronnie or Nadine. Right. But it's so good to hear your voices again. I haven't seen either of you in a while, and I always learn so much from spending time with you both. I like everything in like Indian country is a step closer, and I've been thinking a lot about mothers is like a more gentle term. Like lately I've been hearing people, they always have to add like, okay, this is my biological mom. And then I've been explaining to people like, oh, she's like my mom. Like she's more than my aunt, but she's like, you know, and then it's just, it gets caught up. And then I've been thinking about how grandmothers hold such a special place in everybody's hearts. And to me, like my grandma on my dad's side raised me for sure. I used to mix up my letters all the time, and she was the one who spent all the time like getting me in line. And so I think about all these things, but I also think about all these stories of grandmothers too. And it's like, who steps up to the plate at the end of the day? And it's always the grandmothers. And I've been like really fixated on learning about like history of resistance in Ireland the past like 2 weeks. They've been calling up all my Irish friends. Like one of them, he grew up in West Belfast in I guess the 70s and the 80s, and he was telling me about, I can't remember the first part, but the hens that would come out and they'd follow the soldiers and policemen around and make sure that everybody's loved ones were looked after, and they would shout their names back to these grandmothers and mothers, and then they would run back to the houses and say like, your loved one made it safe, this is where they're staying, this is who took them. And I've been thinking about that in connection to all the acts of resistance here. It's like, who steps forward first? It's always the grandmothers. Who takes in the babies? It's the grandmothers. And it's close, but it's also, we can see it like in our neighbor's home in the house across the street. Like it's everywhere, and it's also reflected in these stories. Ronnie's always talking about squaho and suam. Pardon me, I'm like really, like my English is pretty busted already. And so it's just interesting thinking about like grandmothers always comes up first, and yeah, it's just really magical. So I can't really remember the question, but I always think about like, oh, like who connects us? It's like grandmother spider, grandmother weavers. It's like it's the lady upstairs, and she's probably got a bunch of kids and a bunch of grandkids. It's like, you know. And then you were talking about Mount Baker and all his wives and things, and I was like, well, they probably are significant grandmothers. So yeah, there are anchor points. Okay.
Rita?
Sure. I just want to acknowledge my grandmother's names. Mak Lai Hing is my papa, and Yu Lai Hua is my Nyen Nyen. And I didn't actually get to use their names very much growing up because, but the two grandmothers I want to acknowledge today, though, are grandmothers from this land and this territory. One is Ta'a at Tsewatooth, also known as Amy George. She called on a whole bunch of people to warrior up years ago, and I think in both 2014 and 2018, you know, thousands of people heard that call and rallied around on Burnaby Mountain. And that work to protect the inlet, I think, is still ongoing. It's in a different phase now, but it continues in different forms. And I want to acknowledge Kaya George's film, Our Grandmother, The Inlet. It's a beautiful film that just came out in the past year and reminds us all that when we live on Coast Salish lands, it's our responsibility to learn Coast Salish stories and laws. And the inlet is the oldest grandmother, the way I've heard Kaya tell this. And there's so much wisdom and deep love in feeling the inlet as your relative, feeling the land and the water as part of your family. English fails me, and we should break it, but we have to figure out how to remake it in ways that align with the syntaxes of the languages here. And the other grandma I want to acknowledge is Sophie Frank, because I work at Emcee Carr, and Sophie Frank was from the Squamish Nation, and she actually taught Emcee Carr how to paint. Like, she taught Emcee Carr how to see the forest. And we all recognize Emcee Carr's name, but we should be recognizing Sophie Frank's name as well. So just acknowledge that.
Can you talk a bit about just Rita's contribution to the side of the elements chest, maybe?
Yeah, or why don't we let Rita describe it?
I met Nadine through our mutual friend Dorothy Christian, and also through Jen and David. And part of Dorothy's work many years ago was the directive to bring people together from all four directions for the sake of the water, which is also for the sake of ourselves. And so the chest, Nadine could say more to it than me, but comes with that vision of bringing together people as relatives from different cultural backgrounds and histories, because we need to get our act together. And like, our differences can be a strength. They don't have to divide us. And I think there's ways that we do and can resist that colonial divide and conquer mentality. And so I contributed a poem to the chest, which I'm very honored to do.
Well, the mic has traveled all the way down here now. It's got to be equal about this, but go ahead, David, your relationship to grandmothers.
It's interesting. I have a very different relationship to my grandmothers from everybody else who is here, I think. in that my grandmothers were honored old people that I saw once a year, one of them, the other maybe every 3 or 4 years. And when I was with them, my job was to help. I was a little boy. They needed something, they wanted something, they shouldn't have to ask, that sort of thing. And I'm compulsively early to meetings and was sitting in the Bill Reid Gallery inadvertently beside a loop of Nadine being interviewed. And I was really early. So I listened to this loop. I was working and listening at the same time. I listened to that loop for half an hour or 45 minutes. Listened to you talking about the project, talking about the art, the struggle, and really wanted to help. And it took quite a bit of convincing to have Nadine realize that that was really all I wanted. And so now I'm the token shama at the table and feel very, very out of place because I want to be over there taking a picture or getting something or driving the car. So I'm pleased to be here, but also really, really uncomfortable.
Thank you, David. I want to just ask you the question. Yep, you could pass the mic down because we've got lots of mics over here. You're very humble about your, support and involvement. Maybe you can just share a little bit about how you, scouted the various locations and points. Oh, there's several mics now. Oh my gosh. Okay. Mics for everybody. You get a mic, you get a mic, you get a mic. Maybe you can share a little bit more about your own journey scouting the various locations for the filming of this project.
I still think it was a test.
Did you pass? Did he pass?
Well, I'm here. So I don't know how many times, but several times I said, what can I do? And that's a terrible question because you have to evaluate the person that's asking the question, and then you have to be willing to say, I need this or I want that. Nadine's pretty good at saying, I need this or I want that. And she gave me the task of, I got this email that said, can you paddle a canoe? And I thought, well, I'm not a grandmother. And she can't want me to be in the boat. But when I said, yeah, I could, I was asked if I could spend some time on the river looking for places to land, looking for places to launch. And it was the best time. I have paddled quite a few canoes, but I haven't been on the water in that way for a long time. And spending that time looking for different sites, trying to imagine how many people there would be, what they would need, how mobile they were, all that kind of stuff. It was a beautiful day. And it really drew me back towards the river. And I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Maybe a question for Nadine. A lot of this project, as has been talked about, is so multi-layered. There's so many dimensions to this work, and then even we've had so many conversations about the word project, and instead using the word initiative. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what do you hope people to take? What do you hope people will take away from the Honoring Our Grandmothers Healing Project initiative? Journey. Sorry, I'm very, very, very jet lagged.
He just got in from Japan.
So I'm doing my best.
When I think about that's the hard part because I think that's the idea that people also put on grandmothers and women and the matriarchs is that's what we always have to think about is what is everybody going to get out of it? And that's what we do, isn't it? As mothers, as women, as people within the community. And I do believe it's all different for everyone. I've learned a lot of lessons and continue because it was talked about too. And I like always, like I said, going back to the artists, how they speak to me in their riddles of stories that actually mean something to me. And when I look at someone had said, you know, what we're actually doing through honoring our grandmother's healing journey has been done before, and in so many different ways in each one of our communities in our own way. The only difference is that it's been done before, but we are in a new time with ourselves now of what that means with what we're dealing with the genocide. So we're learning a lot together along the way, myself included, of knowing that the patience for myself, the patience for others, and learning that actually a lot of people are really at the state of almost becoming children again, in the sense of how they look at what they've been taught since they were kids of Indigenous people or of themselves. Everybody's at this point of really questioning who they are, where they come from, what is their part to do within their community, and really having, I think when I really look at it in the bigger scope of it, is I'm hoping each person is going to step back out of how they see themselves and what they're taught they're supposed to fit in this world, in this job, and how they supposedly were raised by their mom or their dad or their grandma. But they actually step back to take a look at who they actually are. Where do they actually come from? What are their beliefs? How do they bring themselves good to the community, in what way that is? But know who you are first, and know the community that you're in, and know that history of the people. Because I don't, on the bigger level, I don't see, this is also not a journey of a commercial venture. This is not one of marketing and advertising and performance. This is of real people's lives, of the struggle that we still live with internally ourselves, within our families, which is a lot of work to process. At the same time, you're still pulling the journey. You're still pushing the journey. But you're also guided, I honestly do believe, by those stories and by those ancestors. So just like Athena, what was that question they asked? Did that kind of answer it?
Yeah.
It was a perfect answer, Nadine. What are you talking about? You're always great. This is a perfect segue to Ronnie, because I actually had a question around, because Nadine's talking about ancestry and history and the complexity. So I want to actually ask Ronnie, as a descendant of Chief Coquitlam, I'm curious around how and whether your lineage, I'm curious if your lineage carry any profound ties to the land, and of course it does, and its history. So how does your connection to Chief Coquitlam and your ancestral legacy influence your activism and creativity and creative work?
Lineages. I was raised in Quyen territory by my step-grandfather, Robert Thomas, Steetsumton. His mom was Cecilia Point. That's why I always say Cecilia. I'm like, hey. I grew up in front of a picture of Cecilia, a picture of James and Johnny and Robert Point, those old timers, and I didn't really know who they were. I was just a kid. But Grandpa Coquitlam's picture was on that same wall, and it turns out that Grandma Emily Coots, that was Grandpa Coquitlam's second wife. And so in the 1921 census, you can see Uncle Dominic and Cyrus Ambrose living at Coquitlam with my grandpa as stepsons. So I grew up at Albion. My papa was Bob Thomas, his dad's Francis Thomas, and then Cecilia was his wife. In 1808, when Simon Fraser comes by, where I'm living now, it's Tzitzilis there at the mouth of the Burnett,
The village is inhabited by Squalsalem, the family of Squalsalem. And Squalsalem is the descendant of Papa Bob Thomas, Squalsalem, Salipton. And so when after Simon Fraser goes by and then, you know, has to come back because he didn't fare so well down the river there, because he wasn't a god like he wanted to be seen as. And then explorers and fur traders start coming in the 20s, and then they build the fort at Fort Langley. And so that makes our cousins up there on the coast pretty angry, and they wage war on the fort, and this is a dangerous place to live. So these families move up past the fort, so that all that business is gonna be bounced off them. If you go back into these records, the city says is that, well, they abandoned those sites. We didn't abandon nothing, we moved. Those transformer sites tied people there to the names and to the kinships. So 1820s come and those families move, and then 1858, it's a gold rush. And then they're doing all these incursions around, and then I live in Sapperton, as they call it, right? It's Tsitsilis. And so they bring the sappers out, and you know, I learned this, and this is what this journey is about for me, is learning. Sometimes you got to do ceremony before you learn something. Sit down and listen, thinking you're going to learn something right away. So carrying that box in the rain with our buddy Rob up there across town, and we're stopping at these sites that means something to our people here. And so he stops us at the corner of Richmond and Columbia. And he's like, hey, I'll show you something. Put this box down. Oh, yeah, well, it's the heritage guy. He's got something to show, obviously. So I go listen. And he shows me what is called the Observatory of the Royal Engineers Camp. So 1859, when they come here, they find Chief Similano living up there at Statlow, at the creek there. In the records, they say he was compelled to leave. Of course, the sappers are a military outfit. Who are you going to say no to? And then they move them across the river where there's a revenue station, and they're trying to charge gold miners to go up the river. They're making money. For who? For the crown, right? To fuel the colonial machine. So the sappers, they create that, and they take these astronomical observations, and they find the latitude, the meridian, and they create this marker. That marker is the beginnings of where they begin to measure the land so they could sell that land to fund the colonial machine. They measure the land using these chains called a Gunter's chain. 66 feet, 100 links. Is it 10 of it's like a cubit or something like that? If that matters to anybody on this Sunday here. So the sappers' first goal was to measure the land into lots, to a grid system that you see. Colonel Moody runs this Columbia Street all the way up to North Road. That begins the line, that begins the grid system that measures out these lots. Now it's 1864, 1860s, we've got the Butte Massacre Inlet. Our people, our relatives on the island are not having this. Our relatives up there at Silcoteen, they're not having it. And they paid the price down here, and relative Ahan. So 1864, May, the Queen's birthday, Governor Douglas quits. And our people were like, well, he gave us all these promises. He gave us these reserves. So Governor Seymour, with war on his heels because of the Butte Massacre Inlet, calls this big gathering on the Queen's birthday down there at Sapperton. 4,000 of our people show up in canoes from all over to listen to the word of Governor Seymour. 4,000 of our people go back to their communities with a promise. Oh, he says he's going to put a third of our money away. All these lands sold from this chain. Some of our ancestors made into chainmen to measure the land so they could sell it. Oh, they're going to put this money aside for us, for our people. That's the promise. They gave us hats. They gave Similano a staff. They named my grandpa Quyen at Coquitlam. They gave him the name Captain John there, and they give us those fancy hats. And what do we say? They say, oh, well, they traded their land for buttons and blankets. In our culture, you give us something when you talk, we're going to sit, and we're going to witness, and we're going to listen. So when Governor Seymour said, oh, yeah, third of every dollar sold of land sold outside reserve lands we put aside for your people, we took that as sacred word, witnessed word. That all happened at Sapperton, where we live, where my ancestors are from, where our ancestors are from, and where these reserve systems now are this response to the Indian Act coming here. My people, our family moving up the river is in a response. Musqueam, Kwantlen, Coquitlam, Kakate, responses to the Indian Act, the division that these lines created. And we just went through this year of truth here in New Westminster. Where was this truth? How hard was that? When we talk about time, since time immemorial, legally time immemorial only goes till 1159 AD, when these court systems happen in England. These transformer stories, Cheam, who stands up there, who stood up there at the bridge, these place names happen in a time of transformation now. I was listening to these stories, and I was listening to some of the descriptors, and one of them talks about the transformers going out to Tsawwassen, when Tsawwassen was just an island fastened to the mainland by a cedar rope. Now, you can deduce it, and you can go into the archaeological record and go into the early Holocene, and you can find out exactly when Tsawwassen was an island. That's where my grandma's from. That's where Watlakainum's grandma's from. That's where my grandma from Coquitlam, that's where she was from. So these kinships existed a long time ago, and especially connected to Oolakins. And the people who came here to gather those things, we shared stories, we shared songs, we shared potatoes, we shared fibers, we shared all the good things that came, all those good. And when I drop into this world, just almost in a friggin' residential school in utero, 1979, I'm adopted and I go to Albion. And that cycle of people coming from the island to come and get Oolakins is still happening. I remember those big Ziploc bags of clams they used to get, the big margarine country crock things of clams. You knew it was Oolakin season and people come and stay at the house. I drop in, and that process is still going on since that time of transformation when Swanisik brought that lady down and she put those Oolakins in the water. So this year of truth we're really putting focus on these transformed ancestors, the animals in those ancestor stories, and the habitats that are connected to them. Because if those ancestors don't exist there, then this ecosystem is out of balance, and then that's a disruption, a further rupture of these stories. So if in the years that I've worked here, without ever stepping foot into these archives, I can find all of this, then where are the people with the information that are going to bring forth the rest of it? Right? Because that contact, they have information about it. Just let me see it. Let me see it. Right? So I learned this since walking with you on that journey. I learned this since walking with you guys on that journey. I've held this chain in my garage for, I don't know, a couple of years now. It was given to me as a gift for a project I did. I was like, okay, that's weird. I'm not scared of it. It's rusty, okay? I'm not spiritual contamination. Symbols are important. In our stories, symbols are important. If we're going to talk about Squawquo, we're going to talk about Squawquo of New West, and we need to talk about Squawquo of what a sapper really is. Year of truth, this is going to be my truth. I've been sitting on this information now because I wanted to be really sure about it. And I have to talk to my auntie first before I bring out the rest of it. I don't know what the question was either.
Let's give Ronnie a big round of applause.
If you guys want to learn more about how the land theft was like a game, go to grandtheftterrafirma.com. It lays out the plan of how land theft was a game, and I'll be your guide through that program. grandtheftterrafirma.com. It's like Grand Theft Auto, but it's like about stealing the land. Go and learn about it. It's the truth here. And I hope, like, you know, the thing about it is, you know, someone mentioned to me recently, like, we should tear down that Sapper statue. I was like, no, I don't want a bunch of old people mad at us for something you wanted to do that you thought was going to be good for Indian people. Just uphold our own systems that are already here. These transformer stories go right by here. This is World Heritage territory. Katzie in this area are the center of our cosmology, and that's why that mission was set up there. St. Charles' mission was to wipe that cosmology clean. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to re-bring that back. Talk about land back. How about our time back? How about our cosmology back? The cosmology is of that spider lady, of the spider people. Actually, it's spider people up there because there's grandpas and grannies up there, but there's friggin' spiders up there. And that's what we're going to work on bringing back. I'm sorry for being passionate about it, but I'm in a really weird spiritual place, but interacting with these place names and these old stories. I don't even want to be here right now, but I had to come and share this. This is part of this history here, that the Sappers were here, and it's Sapper. I live on freaking Sapper Street. So I'm working on bringing these place names back, but not in a way that's going to be for non-Indigenous people first. We're going to teach our kids first. Teach my kids and our kids first. And then we'll let you guys know. We'll teach you how to say it, maybe. Yeah? That's all I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, Ronnie.
I had no idea that was going to happen. We made eye contact and then it happened, but I am so glad that happened. We did have more questions prepared for the rest of the panel, but in the interest of time, I actually want to relate this because that was so moving and powerful. I want to actually relate it to a question to Mary Point. And I'm also wondering, for those who were involved in the Grandmothers Project, and whether you were in the film or part of the canoe journey, can you just raise your hand, just so everyone acquaints with each other? Just put a face. Great. Fabulous. Mary, I chatted with you just before the film started, so I hope it's okay I ask you this question, because what sort of Ronnie prompted me to sort of relate this question, given your work. So I'm just gonna go right for it. The history of the YVR lands and the displacement of Musqueam members in 1931 speaks to a legacy of harm that cannot be undone. So how have you, I'm relating this to beings here in New West and the history of harm. So how have you approached navigating this complex history and the tensions that may arise from it, both within the Musqueam community as well as in your relationship with the airport? And what advice would you offer to others, perhaps those of us here and in the audience, working to repair their relationship in the context of historical conflict with this exhibition here in New West?
I'm going to try and remember the question. So for those of you who don't know, I'm the Director of Indigenous Relations at YVR. And I'm just going to try to boil down millennia to a few sentences. But I will start before contact. The airport sits on what is now called Sea Island. The delta formed in the last 3,500 years. And our families had 5 village sites, but secret berry picking spots and courting spots and fishing holes and places of ceremony and gathering. The airport wasn't the first thing to land on that island once the visitors came, but it came through a series of broken promises, as you say. And part of the broken promises began when we were asked, we thought we were in trade talks, let's say, for lack of a better description, and we were being good tradespeople and negotiators in the early days. But so much happened. The Royal Commission, the British North America Act, the Treaty of Niagara, like all these things that said, if you don't take arms up against us, you can live on your land and practice your culture, like free to be who you are. But at the time of Confederation, I'll fast forward, it was decided that we don't want to do that. The government decided we don't want to honor any of the promises that we broke. We didn't actually sign up for a lot of that stuff, but we did believe it. There was no final agreements made with us, but then came a whole series of broken promises that began with, if we take your children, you're less likely to fight us on everything else. And soon, as we all know, we couldn't work or vote or leave the reserves without permission and raise our own children, speak our own language, gather in groups of 3, hire lawyers to negotiate the changing rules and regulations. And we were moving back and forth, trying to share our trade routes, trying to work forward and walk the path together. And on the narrowing in on what is Sea Island, the airport sits on a Crown lease, on Crown-held land held until we do decide jurisdiction. We know we're in Musqueam. We know we know where we are and who we are. But that land that the airport sits on was at one time described as Musqueam Indian Reserve number 3. And, but before that, we knew it as Smaltsum and Huayat and Huaycathan and Squisathan and across the way, Spalakwaks and so much more. The place of blueberries, the blueberry forest, the place of abundance, the place of the black duck, the place where people whistle when they talk, the place that slopes into the water, the boiling point, the place where the fresh water meets the salt water. These were important places to gather crab apples, places that we knew the movement of the land beneath the water. We knew where to go when the tide shifted, it was in a time way before there was any free, prior, and informed consent at that time. And we thought we had a deal, but we didn't. And then the airport landed on top of us, and we were rudely asked to leave, I'll say politely. And to answer your question about all of that harm, I'll just say that harm carried on for a little bit longer. In 1995, the airport was in the process of switching from a Crown corporation governed by the Ministry of Transportation to an airport authority, a nonprofit community-based organization. But it was determined that in order to be an efficient airport, that there would be a need for a north runway and a potential third runway. So in 1995, not so long ago, that land was further expropriated into a tiny triangle of land on the northwest corner of the island. And this is something that sits deeply in the hearts of our families in Musqueam, because this meant there was going to be digging, and this meant that there was going to be desecration of and that north runway was going to go right through our former village sites, and where our late loved ones and their belongings are in the earth. Our whole history is written in that, for our time on this particular island, our history is written there. And our Tiakthat, who I mentioned, and many of our grandfathers and parents and uncles and aunts, they really raised their voices, and in fact came over onto the island and said, we need to protect this land, but we had no rights and no say, and no one's ears were open. And it's something that has sat heavy with us since that time. And then I'll fast forward a little bit further along the line to 2014, when the airport issued a news release that went out into the front pages of newspapers. Remember those, not so long ago? And it said, YVR announces corporate Indigenous strategy. And Musqueam was like, hello? Did you want to talk to us about this? And actually, I've read it. It was pretty rudimentary. It was like a grade 12 project, or more junior than that. It was really, didn't have a lot of meat and bones to it. It wasn't really a strategy at all, in my opinion. But at that point, our chief, Wayne Sparrow, this is public, so I can say, he phoned up our previous CEO at YVR and said, you better talk to us or we're going to come over there and shut you down. And we had reputation for meaning what we say and saying what we mean. But Craig, he said, let's talk, come on over. And for the next 2.5 years, Musqueam leadership and YVR executive had some very strong conversations, lots of learning about what was important to Musqueam. No preconceived ideas were going to come from the airport people. They were there to learn. And also, Musqueam had real concerns about what was happening at the airport and everything that, all these unanswered questions. So after months and months and months, years together, they came up with the Musqueam Indian Band YVR Airport Sustainability and Friendship Agreement. And I would describe it really as something that many might decide is, on the face of it, might look like a lot of other agreements between organizations and Indigenous people, but there are some differences. And the most important difference is in the first page, in the first paragraph, YVR, the Airport Authority, acknowledges Musqueam's constitutional Section 35 title and rights to that land. That was really important to us as Musqueam people to have that acknowledged. And immersed in that agreement, of course, there's jobs and scholarships and apprenticeships and contracting opportunities, but what else is important in there is protection and preservation of our history and of the land and waters around the airport, because of that, there's a river that runs right between us and what is now known as Indian Reserve Number 2, where most of our families live. Well, 50% of us live there, and 50% of us live off-res. But we were worried about emissions and seepage and de-icing fluid and what's happening, but also our ancestors, our late loved ones and their belongings, like what is happening. And we really wanted to have a say in future development and updating business policies. And so that all of that was clearly outlined into all of that. And to answer your question. I want to just give that bit of background, but what does that mean to go there and work there? Well, I remember when the agreement was signed, it was before it was signed, it was shared with everyone in community, so community could have a say on what's in it and what's important. And then part of that was someone who would implement. There was a role for someone to implement and maintain the agreement and really get it going. And so 38 people from community applied for that job. That's how important this agreement was to community. And I remember going through the process because 38 people, they were all awesome people. So I had no idea who was gonna get it. And I just thought, this is a good process because I get to learn a little bit about what's going on. And I was like pretty chill all the way through, just be myself, because I never thought I was gonna get it. And then they told me my 8th and final interview was going to be with our elders. And that's when I got nervous because I thought, oh my God, can I spell? Can I draw a map? Can I speak the language? Do I know enough about our history and stuff like that? And so I was really super nervous to go for that interview, but it was the most important interview as well because they asked me like lots of basic interview questions, but the questions that stand out in my mind are how am I going to make sure when our people come to join me at the airport, how are we going to make sure that they don't feel alone or less than or racialized? And how are we going to incorporate culture into everything that we do? Because that's really important. I think back to our great leader, Kea Polano, who said, don't forget who you are, but don't forget who we are. We're walking this path together. So when I was thinking about that, I thought, well, I've never done anything by myself before, so I'm going to bring all of you with me. So we had desks for the elders. I did end up getting the role, and every single day, to answer your question, is about educating and really making sure people understand what the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is about and how to incorporate those 42 articles into our strategic planning, into our operational planning, into what we do, how to think about the 18 articles of the Friendship Agreement and make sure that Musqueam knows we're keeping our promises here. And also, so we did like lots of teaching and lots of programs, and we brought the elders and we did education and language, and we did a project together. We carved a canoe together with 10 Musqueam families and 126 staff, not a major art project, just a thing where we would use our hands together where the stories come. And then I'll just finish by saying the last really big turning point, well, maybe 2 turning points for us would be in May of 2021, because we had great successes. We had 91 people from Musqueam working at the airport and 27 contractors and lots of stuff underway, and then pandemic. And then in May of 2021, we had the first announcement of the first 215 at Kamloops, the Shequepnik Residential School. And when I came into work that day, there was a line of people outside my door asking me, is this true? How could this be true? I'm a good Catholic, this couldn't have happened. And I was like, what have we been talking about for the last 3 years? But everything was getting real in the pandemic. And so our new CEO, Tamara Vrooman, who's there now, we did a lot of things on that day. We lowered the flags and put out an ops bulletin that we were gonna have a moment of silence on the curb because it was a pandemic. And I didn't really, it was a lot of steps, light the tower orange, all of that. And a couple hours later, we were on the curb and I didn't even know what to expect. I didn't know if anyone was gonna come. Every uniform from across the airport was standing on that curb when we stepped out. And when we blanketed a couple of survivors who work at the airport, another shockwave, because John's only 55 or something and he works at parking and he never said that he went to residential school. And I was like, why would he? But then came a demand for us to do more. So our CEO added a reconciliation lens to our corporate strategy, which requires every single person in their job description has to incorporate reconciliation into their operational planning. And of course, that made another line outside my door because people wanted me to tell them what to do, but that wasn't the idea. We're not here to, it can't always be on us, right? So it's been a really interesting and amazing thing that we're working through at YVR. When we think about the 94 calls to action, it begins with legacy. And so what is the story that each of them wants to tell when they're thinking about what they've learned and what they want to do as they move forward, and how to update our business policies, and how to incorporate an understanding of the land and who we are, and how to think about what is true equality. It's not just about your diversity statement, it's more than that. And the very last one, welcome newcomers, and our elders do come, and with cedar when the refugee flights land and so on. But the other turning point was just, I've always said, I come to work every day and I'm mindful that I'm walking where my ancestors once walked and where many now rest. And I'm involved in every engineering project, whether they're replacing a hydro pipe or whatever. Like, it's a very fulsome job. And I always make them go inch by inch. And they don't really, you know, the project managers, they like to get the job done, but I want them to be mindful, because what we have on Sea Island, my last point is, since 1931, when they first started to bring the airport there, what we have is really the largest protected yet uninvestigated archaeological site in the Lower Mainland. So much of our lives have been desecrated and chipped away at, but here we've got this whole big wide open space that is largely untouched. And so there's lots of learnings and lots of education and lots of people making sure that they know they can't put a shovel in the ground unless there's a Musqueam person standing right beside them who knows what they're looking at with archaeology. So it's a lot of teachings. It's going to be lots of great stories to tell. That was a really long answer to your question, but we're walking it, we're doing it, we're teaching every single day. So
thank you, Mary. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience. Yes. And David's going to run the mic to you. Thank you.
Yeah, this is such learning. My grandmother was born in Zanzibar, and then she migrated to the mainland of Tanzania. I don't know if you know the history of Tanzania, but it's like BC, and Zanzibar is like Vancouver Island. So she migrated to Dar es Salaam and then to inland southern Tanzania, where I was born. And then she came here to Vancouver, where she passed. So her experience is as how displacement through colonialism has affected my grandmothers. And this is our common history of colonialism, right? My grandparents were farmers in India, and then they were merchants, and they were brought to Africa as merchants. And they were brought to Uganda and Kenya to build a railway, like they were brought here to build a railway. The Asian people built a railway here. And our relations between Indigenous people and Asian settlers, I think this is the untold story. I mean, what we learn here today, right, is they don't teach this in school. They're not teaching our stories of experience of colonialism and your experience of colonialism in our schools. Our stories are not being told either. They don't teach this in schools in Africa either, or in India. And so this is the cultivation. I'm also a filmmaker, so I'm really enriched today about this film and the stories that come out of it, because this is what I'm exploring as a journalist, as a filmmaker, to talk about white supremacy and patriarchy and how it's affected us. And this is where the learning happens. So thank you so much.
Thank you. You should see the behind the scenes filming process when we're outside in the rain and the elements. It's like a ragtag of weirdos and quirkies and freaks, like every color under the rainbow. It's what happens when we all bump up against each other. We're not all alike. We are all very different from each other, and yet somehow we're still working together and existing and coexisting in one space to create art. So thank you for that. It's quite lovely to hear.
Any other questions for the panel?
You know what? I've got one. Hello, thanks. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for your time and all your effort making the film. It was a lot of fun to watch, very educational, very moving, and all the speeches that have happened and everything, the whole discussion has been a privilege to be a part of. Question I have is, do any of you have thoughts on what we could do to change and adapt the education of children in schools so that this history is being taught from the beginning? Because personally, a lot of it is quite frankly bland, and if you don't know what to look for beyond that, you never learn, and we're only learning these things as adults. Hopefully it's changed since I was a kid learning these things in school, but I do feel like it would be much more foundational, or we'd be working with the same set of facts if we knew this stuff when we were growing up in school and you weren't affected by it, in your family. So are there ways that we can, first of all, do you have any thoughts about that? And more importantly, are there ways that we can help support those efforts, if any are being made?
Thank you. I'm going to give that question to Rita, if that's okay, and then Athena.
I could start, sure. I think we need to hear, obviously, more directly from the host nation's knowledge keepers here. And I think that that's happening on a kind of voluntary basis in terms of how to make it more accessible in a systematic way. I think that's an ongoing conversation or process. But I would say that having gone through the colonial school system, I can't overemphasize enough how important it is to be out on the land and to listen to the people of the land and the waters stories. Like, I think that that would actually make educational way more meaningful to a lot of kids trapped in that system at the moment, just for starters. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I'm sure there's a lot more. Yeah. I'd love to hear from Ronnie all the time.
That's part of me gets real riled up when people say, oh, we really want you to come into our school because of XYZ. And I feel like it puts a lot of pressure on Indigenous people, and we throw around the word elders a lot, but it's like, who are they at the end of the day? They're like aunties and uncles, and they're human too. And I think about how much pressure they get put under. And as an artist, I like to spend a lot of time kind of in solitude to like gather my thoughts, and then I hang out with my besties or my uncles and my aunties. And sometimes I get kind of scrambled. I'm like, well, we need to bring in Indigenous people, but we need to bring in people that are comfortable working in these environments because they can often be quite triggering as well. I remember supporting one of my mentors at UBC, and I thought I would be okay with it, and then something about those fluorescent lights just kind of set me off, and I wasn't very much help that day, but it was still good to witness how he conducted himself in that environment because he's comfortable working in schools. But it can be quite a lot to invite in people who it's just not the right environment for them to be teaching in. And being outside is really helpful, but like, when is the school year? It's during the winter and the fall and the spring when it's wet and muggy out, and apparently there's a lot of people who don't like the rain. So it makes it quite difficult to have these conversations when people aren't even comfortable being outside on the territory. And I think about what my Uncle Shane reinforces constantly with people, and it's like, okay, language, culture, and ceremony is what holds us together, and it's who we are. And what does that come from? That comes from the geography and the ecology. And so when Ronnie shares these stories of place-based histories, these names, these like our lineage, our genealogy, everything that kind of holds us together and teaches us where we come from, he's talking about the environment, and he's talking about the geography and the path of the transformers, and how he speaks about the timelines is so different. And he's kind of started everybody on, well, like people who have him on Facebook, about like how we measure time. And I've been thinking about it constantly because I used to get kind of irritated with some of the language we use in English. We say like, oh, we want to do things in a good way. And I flipped out in a meeting one day and I said, like, tell me exactly what you're going to do. Like, don't tell me in a good way. Tell me exactly what you're going to do. And they were like, oh, and I said, no, like, you have to break it down. You have to understand what you're doing and not just sort of throw these words around. You have to show us, like my teachers are people that they're like, don't tell me, show me. And and that's who our teachers are. And so like we need to show people, like looking at this chain, I was thinking like, these are like the phalanges of colonization. They're the things that really like reached out and grabbed the land. And part of me is really like, because I'm really like inquisitive. I'm like, oh, I want to like touch it and things. But then on the other hand, I'm like, this is kind of like a gun without the bullets. And I know it won't hurt me, but it's still like, I don't want to play with it type of thing. Yeah. And so it's really interesting thinking about the different avenues we take supporting students. Because I went to school in Richmond, and in the Richmond School District, we had Lynn Wainwright and Mike Akawenzi, and I probably wouldn't have made it through like elementary school or high school if it wasn't for them. And they had a program where they took Indigenous students out, and it took a lot of pressure off, where I could be like, okay, this is just like my hour to be an Indian right now. And that was nice. And then in the classroom setting, it was also helpful to learn there, but it was still like bits and pieces, and it wasn't all the support I needed, but it was help. And they're really good people to talk to regarding working in schools, because they've worked in schools for such a long time now. And I know that in Richmond, we have Nora Stogan working, and every time I see her, I'm like, oh, I have so much faith in this, in like where we're going now, because she's such a like rock star. And so I know that there's people that have the capacity and can step into that work, because like it's a lot of pressure for people, and coming up with the like curriculum around it, and there's a lot of education that teachers still need too, and that's a lot to handle a lot of the time. But I think it really just comes down to like language, culture, and ceremony. And what does that mean? That means going out in the rain and loving it. I love the rain. So you know, that's what like washes us off. And like standing outside during a big windstorm when your hair is like all over the place, like that's what cleanses us. And so like it's a gift. And if we change how we talk about our environment and remember that it's like full of teachings, you just got to pick them up. Like, just got to like know what you're looking at a little bit. It helps, but yeah, like emails are kind of the bane of my existence right now. And so I like went through the other day and I was thinking like, oh, part of me is like, I'm letting all these students down, but I know that it's just, we can't all be in there. So yeah, that's where I'm gonna leave it.
Thank you. Let's all remember those wise words when we go in the rain later. Nadine, I'm trying to decipher this note that you passed me. Do you want to ask this?
I know a lot of amazing people, from teachers to artists to language speakers that are out there, and I'm hoping he's not going to turn me down for asking him to speak. Victor Guerin. I've known him for years. He's followed me in different areas, and he knows exactly where I've come from. He knows what I've been through from the very beginning and everything, not with honoring our grandmothers, but within Endlakap Nation, within the politics, within the culture, within the struggle on reservation. But one of the things that I think is important is that we also do have Indigenous people that are preserving the traditions and culture, and at the same time, they still have to, and I heard this from, have to learn the Shema colonial way of reading and writing at the same time that they're also trying to bring and teach other people the language and the culture. And I see a lot of them that I've met that are just incredible teachers, and I've just met another one today, or the other night, that I just want to say I'm really grateful for the people that go out there to fight in so many levels, not just within the colonial education, Western education, but still maintain the traditions, the culture, the values, and the principles. And I feel Victor's one of them, but also the struggle it is to be a teacher within institutions of universities and within the elementary schools, and yet how difficult that must be to be also within that structure that's a government structure of what they're asking within that institution to be even trying to change within that institution and everything that you face every day. So in one part, I want to say thank you for sticking it out, because it's got to be pretty hard to be a part of a whole institution system that's educating, which is leaving out so much important stuff that we need to know. But also, maybe you have some words to state on what you think could be improved, just as long as they don't get you fired, okay? I know how it works.
Victor, do you want to come up here?
O si ya kuislelam kones kui tenitzen mas kuyam. O ya thu hali kosi awareness atana tamu. Ni wa chamasto Captain Vancouver at 1792. He Simon Fraser at 1808. As you've heard, my English name is Victor Guerin. I hail from the Musqueam community. Our people, our ancestors, have always lived on these lands and traveled these waters. They were here to greet Captain Vancouver when he arrived here in 1792. And Simon Fraser when he came on behalf of the Northwest Company in 1808. In that first meeting with Captain Vancouver, it was a congenial meeting. Our people actually, the Spanish were there as well, and our people actually went aboard the ships and traded with the explorers. Just over 16 years later, when Simon Fraser came down the river, he first stopped at the village of some of our relatives upriver on an island up there. We don't know which island. There's some speculation that it might have been Barnston Island, where our Emcee relatives live. When he arrived there, he shared his rum rations with the people he thought were the leaders of the village. And of course, before that, they'd never ever encountered alcohol, and it knocked them out cold. So normally, early risers the next morning, they didn't rise as early as they normally would have, and they were wakened later on by the villagers who informed them that Fraser and his party had transferred all of their goods from their battered canoes into canoes that belonged to villagers and departed without permission for taking those canoes. So the leaders dispatched runners. That was our way of communicating between villages. Fraser's party must have left on the incoming tide because the runners relayed from village to village, and by the time Fraser arrived at Musqueam, there was already a flotilla of canoes with a platform across the bows and warriors awaiting their arrival. And through their interpreter that was accompanying Fraser's party, they informed them that they knew about their indiscretion up at our relative's village, and that they were no longer welcome in this territory, and that they were to go back where they came from and never to come back here again. If there hadn't been a language barrier between our people and Captain Vancouver, I think that transaction would have been similar if they'd have known what was the intent of Captain Vancouver's exploration, because both parties were here to claim the land on behalf of the British Crown. And this is what I see as the impetus for the Grandmothers Canoe Journey initiative. It's all about respect. Colonists, when they came here, viewed our people as primitive, brutal savages and took a paternalistic attitude towards us. Looked upon us as some lower level of humanity, and in many cases, not even humanity. When we look at excavations that happened in Tsasanam, or Marpole village, back in the late 19th century and the early 20th century, one of the things they were doing in removing human remains from there was using pseudoscience, measuring the skulls, looking for evidence to prove that our people were some subspecies, not fully human, in order to justify the way that they'd been treating our people since their arrival here. Because the Bible tells them that you don't treat your fellow humans the way they were treating our people. And that's, to me, what the Grandmothers Canoe Journey, the impetus is all about, is to let the settler population know that we don't accept that assessment of us as less, as subhuman or not human. We've always honored our elders, our grandmothers, our grandfathers, all of our families, our friends in other villages, always honored them, always interacted with them, always cooperated with them in a respectful manner. And to me, that's what the Grandmothers' healing journey is all about.
Thank you, Victor. One more? No?
I think that is a
the
beautiful, beautiful closing from Victor. Thank you so much. Let's give the panelists a big round of applause and all of those who spoke tonight and shared the stories. And we'll hopefully see you at the next phase of the Grandmothers Project. We will be actually filming at the Ulukan Harvest, I do believe. Right, David?
Yeah, right, Nadine?
Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you.
Thank you, everybody.
everyone.
Have a wonderful night. Please come up and say hi.